So first, I want to talk about the importance of nutritional support while breastfeeding. One of the biggest things is that I want you to continue taking your prenatal vitamins. That is something that we think, okay, we've just had our baby, there's really no need to continue that. But I do want you to continue taking them. Um, Snacks, it's really hard as a new mom to remember to eat sometimes. And so I like to tell all my moms to set up a snack station. So wherever you have set up an area to breastfeed in your house, I want you to sort of have a basket of, healthy snacks. Sometimes some not healthy snacks are okay too. And just a drink, maybe some water or juice or whatever it is that you like to drink. And just have that there and have it available so that way when you sit down to feed your baby, you can stop and say, hold on, have I eaten yet today? And if you haven't, then you certainly have those snacks right there to sort of fuel yourself. Um, Another thing that I get asked about a ton is if there are restrictions in terms of what you can and can't eat for when you're breastfeeding. And really, there isn't much that I would say that you shouldn't be eating while breastfeeding. There are certain cases where there are babies who can be a little bit sensitive to certain things, but it's pretty rare. And the one thing that we do recommend is that you just limit your mercury intake, which would be found in like canned fish and things like that. But we recommend that for anybody, not just people who are breastfeeding. So those are just some little bits of information about nutritional support. And then I do want to go over to common issues in breastfeeding. So it's really hard because I sort of pooled all of my clients and sort of looked back to see what was, the most sought after help that, I basically went to go see them for. And the biggest one is, how do I know my baby is getting enough? It's hard because if you are to give your baby a bottle, there's a number on that and you can see how much your baby is consuming versus if you're breastfeeding, you really don't know. But the cool thing is our babies are designed to sort of tell us that they are getting enough. In the first couple days, I actually had my really cool poopy diaper. I hope you guys can see this. So in the first couple days of life, when your baby is born, they have what's called meconium, and it's this black tarry, super hard to get off. And then as your baby is, um, eating and your milk is sort of transitioning from the colostrum to your sort of mature milk or just regular breast milk, you'll notice that the more your baby's eating, then the poop is starting to transition. So you're going to go from this black tarry to sort of like this green. It sort of goes through shades of green. They'll be darker and then get to lighter. And then the normal breastfed baby will have this sort of mustard yellow and sometimes seedy poop. And so that's a good indication that your baby is getting what they need, especially in those first couple of days, because it will sort of transition again from that black to that yellow. Another good way to know is that once your milk has sort of transitioned, you should be able to hear your baby swallowing. So sometimes babies are super loud and they're gulping. Sometimes it's just this really, small sound, but you should be able to tell that your baby is swallowing. At Women and Infants, I know there may be people from all over, so every hospital is different. But at Women and Infants, we have a booklet that's given to you, and any classes that you've taken, you'll probably get a piece of paper as well. And it tells you sort of output goals and as well as how many times you should be feeding your baby. And so usually we recommend 8 to 12 times in 24-hour periods. So if you are feeding your baby that 8 to 12 times and they're actively, eating at the breast, then that's a good indication that they are getting enough. So we want to see that your baby's peeing and pooping, and they're actually actively eating at the breast. So the next one would be difficulty latching. And so I do teach breastfeeding classes. And so when we're using these dolls, it seems like, oh, you just get your baby to breast and everything's great. But it can certainly be hard to get a baby who suddenly their hands are in the way, or they open their mouth super fast and then you go to get them to breast and they close it. So that is difficulty latching is really, really common. But breastfeeding is one of those things where sometimes you just have to stop and sort of take a deep breath and remind yourself that you've got this, because everything just happens so quickly. And especially when you are having trouble latching, it's not just you. And so your baby's trying to learn this as well. Another one would be painful latch. If the latch is painful, it means that it's not right. And so that can be sort of hard, because if you are having trouble latching and then you finally get a baby latch and it's painful, it can just be really, really difficult to move forward. I will say though, if the latch is painful, you don't want to continue breastfeeding. If you sort of, suck it up through a tough latch or a painful latch, then it could get worse as time goes on. So if you sucked it up for that one feeding, and then the next feeding comes, now you sort of already created the damage from the previous feeding, and it just continues to get worse. So breastfeeding should not hurt. It should not be painful. So if there is a painful latch, that's definitely something that I would recommend, seeing a lactation consultant about. And baby is not gaining weight. So in the hospital, it is normal for babies to lose weight after birth. Usually we say between 7 to 10% of their birth weight. Thankfully, you will see your baby's pediatrician pretty soon after birth, once you've left the hospital. And if weight loss is something that is going on, then your pediatrician will likely follow that. And we like to see babies back up to their birth weight by 2 weeks. So if you are seeing that your baby is not gaining weight and you've gone to the pediatrician a couple times, then it may be beneficial to set up an appointment with a lactation consultant, and do what we call a weighted feed, where we'd weigh the baby before the baby breastfeeds, and then we would weigh the baby after as well, and then get an idea of what's going on while they're breastfeeding. All right, and so then I'm going to go into when to see a lactation consultant, and these are sort of just things that I would suggest, but honestly, if you feel like there's a reason that you need to see a lactation consultant, then make an appointment to see a lactation consultant. So if breastfeeding hurts in any way, again, breastfeeding should not hurt. So if you are breastfeeding and it is painful, it usually means that there's something going on. And so it is important to see a lactation consultant, because again, you don't want to have that painful latch and sort of damage done and just continue to push through that. I often hear that you have to just kind of suck it out to get through like the first 2 weeks, and then after that you're okay. And I can promise you that that is not the case, both being on the professional side of this and then also a mom as well, that if it won't get better. You'll just be able to maybe tolerate it a little bit more, but sometimes it's not the case. Again, if your baby is not gaining weight, you'll be working closely with your pediatricians, but it's also a good idea to see a lactation consultant, so we can get an idea of why. Maybe there's something going on where they're just not positioned correctly, and they're not getting as much of the breast in the mouth as they need to, and so they're not really transferring a ton of milk. If your baby is not latching or refusing the breast, really, if this is going on for a significant amount of time, you do absolutely want to supplement, whether that be by pumping and giving them the breast milk in a bottle, or also formula. But again, if your baby is not latching and you really, really want to be successful at breastfeeding, then it is a good idea to see a lactation consultant to make that happen. I think sometimes people forget, but we also can help show you how your pump works, and really set up a plan in terms of pumping if you are planning on returning to go back to work. Pumps are great. They have come such a long way. However, they are not a one size fits all. So if you open that box and they have flanges in there, that does not mean that that is the flange that is the right size for your breast. So if you are planning on pumping and going back to work, you can set up a lactation appointment to go over how your pump works. That we can show you, make sure it's sized correctly, and if it's not, then offer you whatever size it is that you need. And so you have a plan going forward. And then also going back to work. So it can be super stressful to piece all of it together, especially when you are returning back to work. So you can set up an appointment with a lactation consultant to go over, what it looks like to go back to work, how you're going to be pumping at work, and then sort of set up a plan so you're more confident going back. And then the next thing I'd like to talk about is virtual support. So I kind of laugh. I have an 8-year-old, and she's doing all her school virtually. And thankfully, her school is live, so she meets multiple times a day. And the first couple of weeks, she was really upset because she missed all of her friends. I mean, she still does, but she's like, "This is terrible. Like, I can't. Like, I hate." Learning like this and whatever. And I told her, it's a tough time and yeah, it stinks. But if this were to happen when I were, her age, I would have never had the ability to do all of this. And so she sort of laughed, and um, it is a new thing, virtual support. It can be a little bit frustrating because breastfeeding, especially instruction, is very much not necessarily hands-on, but there's a lot of things that play into it. Like in an actual consult, like I want to see how you're positioning your baby. I want to see the anatomy of your baby's mouth and the anatomy of your breasts, and get a feel for what's going on in your baby's mouth. So taking it over to a virtual platform has certainly been a little bit of a struggle, but I'm so thankful that we have the ability to do so. So with the telehealth visits, thankfully most insurances are reimbursing these. So even if you do have to set something up, what happens is, me personally, I provide you with something that you submit back to your insurance company to be reimbursed. Um, and the other cool thing is that I'm not limited to just this area. So if you know somebody that's struggling somewhere else, you can say, hey, I was, in, this webinar and saw that there's a lactation consultant and she can help too. And so that has made it like wonderful because I'm able to help people just outside of this small area. It certainly does not take the place of an in-person visit if weight gain is an issue. So if you do have a baby that is struggling to gain weight, there are some lactation consultants that can still do in-home visits. I believe the hospital is still seeing patients there as well on outpatient visits. Well, that was last I heard, so don't quote me. And so certainly if that's something that's going on, weight is so important in newborns, and so we want to make sure that your baby is getting what they need. And then just if you do book a virtual visit, it's really helpful to have a partner or just anybody close by, because it's really difficult to try to position a baby and hold a device, or to be able to get the angle that I would need to see in order to know sort of what's going on. If you are struggling, there are certainly tons of resources out there. There's tons of people in our community that are willing to help with breastfeeding. And so do reach out.